The legend himself, Tony Hawk. A lot of people say he fell off. Honestly, he kind of did. But let's check out the rise and fall of Tony Hawk. The harsh truth of Tony Hawk is what it's really called. I'm gonna call it the rise and fall.
Tony Hawk will go down in history as one of the most famous skateboarders to ever live.
Legend.
For the better part of 3 decades, he's been the face of skateboarding in mainstream media.
Facts.
He invented many of the tricks skateboarders still do today, and his video game series completely changed the trajectory of skateboarding culture. While
Put me on a whole genre of music, man.
many people know Tony Hawk for his
The
success,
soundtrack of Tony
few
Hawk
people
Pro
know what
Skater
it took
3.
to get there. Tony has gone from just another figure in an obscure subculture to revolutionizing skateboarding and somehow becoming a household name in the process. Today, we're going to take a look into the life and career of Tony Hawk.
Does Tony skate still? Or he's done? Like, I mean skating for fun, of course not competitive.
Tony Hawk's parents were already in the early 40s when he was born in 1968. He had several older
I didn't know Tony Hawk was that old. Holy moly. So he's like pushing 70, 80 years old?
brothers and sisters,
Holy crap.
but because of his age, most of them were out of the house by the time he was a kid, effectively making him an only child. However, just before the last of his siblings would move out, his older brother would introduce
Wait,
him to
is
a
my
new
math
trend
wrong?
called skateboarding.
My older brother
Oh,
was a surfer,
Tony.
and he got me into skating. And then he would drive me to the skate park once a week. Like,
Bro,
come
I
home
can't-
from college,
I
and
can't
take me
do
to the
math
park,
for
and then
shit.
I just got hooked. Like that was
He's
my whole life
54.
from that point on.
Luckily for him, growing up in San Diego in the 70s, he was basically in the epicenter of skating. Almost from the start, Tony was determined, spending as much time skating as possible. He had incredibly high standards and was extremely hard on himself.
Good.
His borderline unhealthy obsession
That's how you get better.
didn't make sense to anyone around him, but it's
They weren't
precisely
trying
what
hard
allowed him
enough.
to progress the way he did. As a scrawny little kid, Tony didn't do well in normal sports. With skateboarding, he didn't let his size stop him, and would even use it to his advantage. He'd
I was
have to
gonna
get
say,
creative in
damn.
order to do certain tricks, which
Mm.
led to a lot of the
Bro, is this actual Tony, like, young Tony footage?
use it to his advantage. He'd have to get creative in order to do certain
What?
tricks,
A 5 fakey backspin slide down the pipe?
which
I don't
led
know
to a
what
lot
the
of the
fuck I'm saying.
innovation that he's now known for. Since he was spending all of his free time skating, it didn't take long for him to get good. He started
Yeah.
entering contests when he was only 11. By the time he was 12, Tony Hawk was already a pro.
Wow.
Mind you, turning pro was
Didn't
a little
mean-
different
didn't
back
mean
then,
anything.
but nonetheless,
Didn't mean
he was
anything back
competing
then.
at the highest level possible.
I turned pro when I was 14. Yeah, and then, but I mean that when I literally went pro, was filling out an entry form to a competition, and I had already reached the top of the amateur ranks, and there was a little
Good
box
shit.
that said pro and a little box that said am. So I checked the pro box.
Yeah,
That was it.
yeah.
After picking up a few sponsors, Tony eventually landed a spot on the now iconic Bones Brigade. This was a brand new team filled with all of the best skaters at the time. Rodney Mullen, Steve Caballero, Mike McGill, Lance Mountain.
Don't know
The
that.
skaters on the Bones Brigade team are largely considered to be the godfathers of skateboarding.
That's dope.
A majority of skateboarding tricks that are still done today were invented by the members of the Bones Brigade. Not only that, but they released some of the first ever skate videos. Now, these days, you might not think putting out a skate video is that monumental.
Nah, back
and
then-
honestly,
Back then? Oh, totally different era.
people back then didn't think it was either. Even
Oh,
the skaters on the
dude,
team saw it
tripping.
as some annoying project that they just had to do.
Oh, nah.
However, these cheesy little videos would completely shift the landscape of skate culture. They were only expected to sell
Culture in general, like the whole BMX and skateboarding, creating mixtapes like that, and then like just just like the 90s era, dude, they changed a lot of just media in general when they did this.
a few hundred copies, but ended up selling tens of thousands.
That's
As one of the
amazing,
leading members of the team,
especially back
this
then.
shot Tony into the spotlight even further. Meanwhile, he was also entering every contest possible, and for the most part, was doing well. This was a
good.
period when new
85
tricks
bucks
were
back
being
then.
invented left and right, and Tony was a major contributor. Between the contest and the videos, he was in a great position.
That's
It was a
great.
bit of a right place, right time scenario because
100%.
skateboarding was undergoing a renaissance,
Mhm.
and Tony was at the forefront. On top of winning tons of contests, he was landing roles in some of the first ever
Movies.
skateboarding movies, which only helped him get even larger royalties from his skate
Yeah.
sponsors. Skateboarding was a massive trend that was perfect for the late 80s.
And then the media ran it into the ground, and then they did the same thing with rollerblading, and then professional scooters,
And since Tony was one of the best skaters around, he was directly benefiting from it. By the time he was a senior in high school, he was already making around 160 grand a year,
golly,
which
inflation,
adjusted
dude,
for
that's-
inflation
yes.
is closer to 500,000.
Dude.
Now, what did he do with all this money? Well, he
Created a
did what
birdcage.
any high schooler would do. He spent all of it.
Oh,
When
well,
you're
shit.
young and earning a lot of money, it's easy to think that it's going to last forever. This is a trap that Tony fell right into. He began wasting money on tons of useless things, just like you would probably expect. This includes parties, vacations, and even a tanning bed for his sister, which is extra
What?
wasteful when you consider the fact that they lived in Southern California.
Yeah.
Out of everything he purchased, one of the only valuable things he owned was a house that his dad convinced him to buy when he was still in high school.
Smart.
Since Tony was
shit,
so
Dad.
young, spending money didn't seem like a big deal. But as he would soon learn, the good times would only stick around for so long. See, the thing about trends is they grow exponentially before
they
eventually dying out. As one of the biggest trends of the 80s, skateboarding wasn't immune to this. Although the skate industry today is well established, back then it was still in its infancy. Just as skate parks and skate companies were starting to develop, the entire industry crashed. Skateboarding was viewed as nothing more than a fad.
And on top of that, a lot of all of the destroying public property and the propaganda and stuff like that, it started making skateboarding as a culture look like a negative thing,
It was some fun
something that only juveniles did, and it ruined the brand image of skateboarding.
toy that was popular for a
minute.
while that had eventually run its course. Sadly, just as Tony rode the wave of skateboarding on the way up, he also rode it on the way down.
He didn't get addicted to drugs, did he?
Most skateboarders don't have backup plans. Honestly, many of them
No.
don't even have a high school degree.
For something like that, like skateboarding and like any sport, really, a lot of people that are so into the sport, that is the only thing they want to do. There is no backup plan. There is no, oh, what happens if I don't make it? It's no like, no, I'm gonna make it. And some of them do, some of them don't. But even those that make it, there's no, oh, well, what if I get injured, or what if the whole genre crashes? Crazy stuff like that. But nobody really thinks about that. It's just like, oh, I want to do this. This is what I'm gonna do. And when you make it, it's like, I'm here now, but things around you can change.
Skateboarding is a young person's game, so if you want to be one of the best, you have to dedicate yourself to it at a young age. But what happens
I know I did not just see a 5-year-old do a 540.
if you want to be one of the best, you have to dedicate
Oh
yourself
my
to it at a
God.
young age.
What was that, a 300? I don't know.
But what happens if skateboarding doesn't work out? How do you make a living when all you know is skateboarding? These were pressing issues that many pros at the time found themselves dealing with, including Tony Hawk. After the meteoric rise of skateboarding in the mid to late 80s, it had a very steep decline in the early 90s. Not only was the skate industry shrinking, but street skating was starting to take over vert skating, which was pretty much the only kind of skating that Tony did. Skateboarding as a whole was dying out, and Tony's discipline within skating was dying out even faster. Month after month, Tony's royalty
got
checks were getting
smaller
cut
and
in half,
smaller.
and there was nothing he could do about it. Tony dedicated the majority of his youth to skateboarding, and when it started falling off so rapidly, he didn't have anything else to turn to. The thing is, he also didn't want anything else to turn to. All he knew and all he cared about was skateboarding. It didn't matter how he had to do it, he was determined to find a way to skate by any means necessary.
I'd say 92 to 96 were the most struggle in terms of trying to make it as a skater, trying to support a family.
As the money began to dry up, Tony was left with very few options. He was in his mid-20s, he had just had his first kid, and he couldn't afford to pay his bills.
Ain't that Ryan Hawk? And why is he on the set of The Office?
This is when he made a risky decision that very few people would make. Remember that house his dad made him buy when he was in
Sold
high
it?
school? Well, by this point, he actually owned 2 houses.
Okay.
With his income drying up, he realized that he wouldn't be able to pay for both. So he ended up making an incredibly bold choice. He sold his newer house, moved his family into his old house, and used the extra money left over to start Birdhouse Skateboards.
Birdhouse.
By starting his own board company, he could still make money
Making a
skating
lot of
and be
money,
involved in
yep.
skating, even if the industry wasn't as big and no one wanted to
Doesn't
see
matter.
his style of skating specifically. It wasn't
Doesn't matter if all the other board companies dry up, Birdhouse is still around. That's even better. Now it doesn't matter who you are. If you want to skateboard, you got to get a Birdhouse skateboarding. Guess what? Tony gets a percentage.
Wasn't a terrible idea, but at the time,
Risky.
it was incredibly risky. Mind you, this was a period when the skateboard market was shrinking year over year. Skate companies all over were shutting down, and here Tony was making the decision to start a new one, all while the industry was in a state of decline.
But it's still, he has his name brand recognition. Tony Hawk's Birdhouse. Oh, well, I'm gonna buy a Tony Hawk board.
As you might have guessed, things started out pretty rough. The company could barely pay for their salaries, and their salaries could barely pay their bills. Tony would even have to resort to doing skate demos in parking lots and editing other companies' skate videos for money. The worst part is, this rough patch wasn't a short-term thing either. Birdhouse was founded in 1992, and for years,
When was
it
it
struggled
profitable?
just to stay open. By 95 and 96, there were serious talks about shutting the company down forever. Fortunately, there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and after going through a few dark years, skateboarding, along with Tony's career, was about to make it out on the other side.
That's Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Get a good knock at the door. This is Activision.
And there is your champion at the Extreme Games, and your champion for all time in skateboarding, Tony Hawk.
Oh, X Games. Of course.
Certain trends just make sense for certain time periods. In the case of skateboarding, it first got popular in the late 60s because it fit that time period. Then it got popular again in the late 80s because it fit that time period. Well, by the late 90s, the public was ready for skateboarding again. In 1995, ESPN launched the inaugural Summer Extreme Games. It featured tons of weird extreme sports that most people
Coffins.
had never even heard of. Barefoot water ski jumping, sky surfing,
What?
bungee
Wait, what?
jumping, had never even heard of. Barefoot water ski jumping,
How?
sky surfing,
This honestly does seem kind of cool.
bungee jumping,
I mean,
and a
that's-
bunch of other miscellaneous sports were all broadcast in mainstream competition for the first time ever. Among all of these random extreme sports that were
Skateboarding
featured
came
was
back.
skateboarding. Since skateboarding was something the
Classic.
public was already familiar with in the past, it ended up being one of the most popular events. Over the next few years, the Extreme Games would eventually become the X Games, and they would refine the entire competition. They dropped a lot of the weird sports that no one had heard of, and instead chose to focus on the things
Sucks
that
to
got the
suck.
best reception. Fortunately for Tony,
Skateboarding,
this not only
snowboarding.
included skateboarding, but bird skateboarding as well. The mainstream exposure of the X Games helped push skateboarding back into the spotlight. Birdhouse
Bro,
mainstream
what?
exposure of the X
Tony
Games
is
helped push
valid.
skateboarding back into the
Tony is valid.
spotlight. Birdhouse skateboards finally started to grow, and Tony's personal skate career also started to do well again. Then, in 1998, the course of Tony Hawk's career and the course of skateboarding as a whole would change
soar.
forever.
All right, when did Pro Skater come out? Early 2000s, right? Oh, the 300. Woo! The first ever.
During the Best Trick event at the 5th Summer X Games, Tony Hawk became the first person to ever land a 900.
900, sorry.
Which has since become one of the most famous moments in skateboarding history. This was a trick that he had been trying for over 10 years, and by landing it for the first time on TV, the significance of the trick and the energy of the crowd made its way into the mainstream. Coincidentally, at the time, he had also been working on a little video game called Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, which was set to come out just 2 months later.
Wow.
It ended up
so
being an
that's
absolute perfect storm because
It's perfect.
skateboarding was rapidly growing,
Yes.
and Tony had a lot of buzz around his name.
Yes.
As many of you might know, the game ended up selling millions of
Yes.
copies and spawning dozens of sequels.
Great game. Great game. Great game. Phenomenal game. Haven't played it. Haven't played it. I thought this was fun. Haven't played it. Trash. Amazing. Haven't played it. Haven't played it. Haven't played it. Ass. Haven't played it. Haven't played it. I didn't know there was a remix. Haven't played it.
The Tony Hawk's Pro
So out of all
ended up
these
selling millions of copies, and
out of this entire catalog, from in my opinion, The games that I haven't played, I'm not going to count. These 3 are amazing. These 2 are amazing. I think this is fun, but the rest of this shit is, I don't know, or ass.
Spawning dozens of
crazy.
sequels. The Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise would be the catalyst that exploded skateboarding's popularity in the early 2000s, and also helped define the music taste of an entire generation.
Yes.
To this day, the Tony
100%.
Hawk Pro Skater games are known for having some of the best sales and best soundtracks in video game history. With the popularity of the games, Tony Hawk became a household name. He began getting tons of endorsements and sponsorships
Bagel
from
bites,
every
bro.
type
I
of
haven't had
company
those
you
in
can
a long
imagine.
time.
Tony,
Bro, remember the God
tons of
Milks?
endorsements and sponsorships from
Bro, these used to be all over the school cafeteria, and I think they would change them out every couple months. I remember we didn't have Tony Hawk. We had like Tiger Woods on there, I think, and we had some other famous people that I don't remember.
every type of company you can imagine.
I think Kobe Bryant.
Tony would go
maybe.
from barely paying his bills in the mid-90s to making millions of dollars in the mid-2000s.
He handed me a check for $4 million.
Oh,
That happened.
Wow.
The best part is, he didn't just keep it all for himself. In
Shit, well,
2002,
he brought
Tony
back
Hawk
skate
founded
parks.
the Skate Park Project, which helps get skate
Yep.
parks built in underserved communities. Since its
Good
founding,
shit.
the Skate Park Project has helped fund over 900 skate parks and has given away close to $10 million. Tony eventually started scaling back his competitive career, but continued to take on a lot of cool
He went
side
to
projects.
space?
He's done multiple skateboarding events with a loop, he's made the world's first ever sideways loop, and he's also put out several video parts. At the age of 48, he was still able to do a 900 on a vert
Oh
ramp.
my
And at the
God,
age of
dude.
50, he put out a video doing 50 different tricks. These days, he still skates multiple times a week and is still
Wow.
finding new ways to innovate. Despite the problems and backlash he's faced along the way, Tony has managed to spread skateboarding in ways that very few people have.
Dude,
Regardless
Tony
of money,
is great.
fame, or accolades, Tony Hawk has stayed true to skateboarding because that's what he loves to do. And skateboarding wouldn't be where it is today without him.
Obviously, I'm
And what's amazing is he was already the best. I'm not saying like the best in the world, whatever, but like in his area, like he said in the 80s when he was a kid, he was already the best of the amateurs, so he signed up for pro, and he did it at 14 years old. Like he became the best, tried hard, became number one in a lot of events, and then instead of like bailing when it got rough, he kept to it. He stuck to his guns. Took a super risky, big risk, big reward. He took big risks, sold his new house, went back to the old house, founded a skateboard company when all their skateboard shops were closing. Like he put everything into the passion, and he made it. If that's not like the whole never give up, then I don't know what is. Like follow your
hugely
dreams.
thankful to still be able to do this for a living. Like
Like-
this is what I love doing more than anything, and I would do it for free. Like any day of the week, at any given time, I'd happily just go skate. It just happens to be the thing that I'm successful at. So I get to do what I love for a living, and that's living the dream. I mean,
It is.
living the dream. I'm not talking about financial success. I'm talking about loving what you do.
Living the dream, not talking about financial success, but to be able to do what you love and survive, I think will be successfully living the dream. You don't have to get rich living the dream, right? I'm living the dream right now. I always wanted to make YouTube videos, and now I'm making YouTube videos. It's what I do, right? So even though I'm not super wealthy, it's totally fine because I don't have to worry about becoming homeless, and I still get to do what I do. I have a nice house. I have 4 monitors. Life's great. I'm not living in some big mansion, but I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And a lot of people will look at my place and be like, oh, that's an okay place. To me, I'm like, I love this place, So I think that's awesome. That's definitely good advice to stick to what you love to do, regardless. Even if it doesn't make you a millionaire, still go for it. As long as you're able to support yourself. And if you do have a family, have it be able to support your family as well.
If you love art and you do art and maybe you get a little bit of success at it, you're living the dream. I know there are so many kids out there that feel the way that I did when I was a kid, just awkward and not excelling at one thing in particular and not cool. And skateboarding was my way out of that.
That's dope. That is dope, man. I already said what I needed to say. That was a dope, man. Dope video. Dope video. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the like button on it. I already did. Yeah, that's a great video. Michael T, dude, that's a great video. I'm subscribing, bro. I'm subscribing. That was a great video. Anyways, it's your boy Miss. Comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.